Are you looking for ways to teach pronunciation more effectively? Are you aware of the phonemic chart but do not really feel confident using it in lessons? I'm Ruben, one of your Pavilion EOT vloggers, and in this 2023 video series, we're looking at different resources that we can use to make our lessons more effective, engaging, and fun. And in this video, I'll give you 5 tips to use phonemic transcription and phonemic symbols to raise awareness of and help students practice pronunciation. Want to know how? So come with me. Let's start by defining some concepts that often cause some confusion. Phonetic transcription attempts to transliterate the exact ways in which a person says something, often using the IPA or the International Phonetic Alphabet. Phonemic transcription or phonemic symbols are something different though. In the words of Mark Hancock, a phonemic symbol represents what the speakers of a specific language think is a specific sound, even though it might in fact be a range of sounds. For example, speakers of English may think all instances of the phoneme t are the same sound, whereas in fact the t in top is slightly different from the t in stop. A phoneme may vary across accents too. The t in city will be different in the accents of London and Los Angeles. The same t symbol can be used to represent all of these sounds. The chart that we usually see hanging on classroom walls includes the phonemic symbols that are most relevant to students learning the English language. Sounds complicated? So let's cut to the chase. Tip number 1, don't take it literally. Remember when I said that the same phoneme may represent a range of different sounds regardless of accents? Each person is unique in the way they speak. There's no such a thing as a unique standard pronunciation of a sound. According to Clive Newton, it is a fallacy to suggest a phonemic script should represent one preferred type of pronunciation. There are as many different accents as there are native speakers. Which do we choose? I believe we need to break free of the idea that any native speaker accent makes the ideal model. With that in mind, the use of phonemic transcription should not aim at providing tools to achieve an idealized pronunciation standard. It should be a means to help students better understand the many different ways in which the English language is used in different contexts and empower students to be more independent learners. Tip number 2, introduce phonemes gradually. In case you haven't noticed yet, let me break the news. Most students do not really care about English. What I mean by that is that although we teachers are passionate about how languages work, most of our students just want to use the language to communicate in the real world. Rather than studying linguistics, they want to be able to operate in real life. In that sense, the use of phonemic transcription can be scary and pointless. And it's also difficult. Learning the phonemic symbols is basically learning a new alphabet. So how can we reap the benefits of using phonemic symbols without overwhelming students? According to Richard Osek, teaching the phonemic chart is not an easy task to undertake, nor will the learners learn it instantly. However, through daily reference to individual sounds whenever they arise, a learner undertaking an intensive English course should be able to refer to the chart competently within a reasonable short space of time. Rather than expecting students to master the phonemic symbols and to be able to write transcriptions themselves, introduce them little by little. A good introduction is by using phonemic symbols to illustrate when there's a diphthong rather than a simple vowel, as this is clearly visible in the phonemic transcription. Tip number 3, help students articulate sounds. Sometimes what students struggle with is not recognizing the sound, but actually pronouncing it. It can be a physical thing. Different languages tend to use different parts of your mouth in different ways. Each sound has its own place of articulation, or area of the mouth where the sound is mainly produced, and manner of articulation, which indicates how the sound is produced. According to Hancock, in learning a new language, we have to master new articulation habits, and this requires focusing our attention onto what we are doing. For example, we have to make a sound and be aware of how the muscles around the mouth feel while we are doing it, so that we can make the sound again in the future. Adrian Underhill called this muscle awareness proprioception. The phonemic chart is usually organized in a way that illustrates the similarities and differences between the sounds. Sounds that have similar place of articulation are usually closer in the phonemic chart. Helping students notice and practice what tongues and lips should be doing in order to produce a specific sound can really help them become more intelligible and confident. Tip number 4, make it playful. Remember that I told you that students do not usually care about linguistics? Well, that means that most of them are not going to be intrinsically motivated to learn the phonemic symbols. Games and playful activities are great resources to help achieve that. If you haven't yet, you can check out one of my previous videos on how to use game in your lessons. There are some pretty straightforward games that most teachers already use to teach and practice vocabulary that can also be adapted in order to deal with pronunciation. Here are some games that can be easily adapted into pronunciation games. Back to the board, hangman, memory game, bingo, and sound maze. Just remember that students' knowledge of the phonemic symbols is limited, so remember to introduce them gradually like we mentioned before. Don't expect students to recognize transcription of full words, especially the first time you play pronunciation games with them. If you're looking for other examples of games and interesting discussions on pronunciation, try looking into the work of Mark Hancock, Taylor Vega, and Laura Patsko. They often share some amazing ideas. Tip number 5, associate sounds to other elements. Learning and memorizing what sounds correspond to each phonemic symbol can be quite difficult. As teachers, we can try to think of ways to help students remember them more effectively. There are a number of mnemonic tools and strategies that can be used in order to help students become more familiar with the phonemic alphabet. One way is to help students create associations between sounds and words. Margaret Horrigan, in a very interesting article for English Teaching Professional, goes beyond that. When talking about sound-word association, she says that once these consonant sounds are associated with a solid example word, the problem of pronouncing them is solved quite easily. The vowels and diphthongs present much greater difficulty to both learners and teachers as their phonemes do not resemble the relevant letter of the alphabet, and a single vowel can carry quite a few different phonemic values. One way to solve this issue is to associate colors with the vowels. She goes on to associate specific phonemes to specific colors whose name contain that sound, like the long E for green and the short I for pink, the diphthong A for gray, and so on. Her article makes for very interesting reading. The sound-word association can go beyond just color. Just like we normally say D as in day when spelling words, you and your students can create your own codes, selecting words to represent the different sounds and use them as your own personal sound reference bank. I hope these tips give you some ideas on how you can use phonemic symbols and transcriptions in your lessons to help your students improve both pronunciation and confidence. Do you normally use phonemic symbols in your lessons? Share your ideas with us in the comment section below. And if you want to keep the conversation going, you can also contact me on all social media at whatisELT. Keep learning and keep teaching.